I was walking past the cold queen. She grabbed my arm and said, "Come sit beside me." Elias pulled his thick hood tighter, trying to keep the cold from creeping into his bones. He had traveled far from the human colonies in the Outer Rim, seeking knowledge, resources, and stories no human had ever seen. But Cryovast was unforgiving. Every step he took sank into the thick ice, making progress slow and exhausting. The sun, or what passed for one on this distant world, was a pale, ghostly orb that barely warmed anything. Elias adjusted his backpack, which held all the tools, rations, and scanners he had for the journey. He had been warned by the colony elders that Cryovast was dangerous, not just for its weather, but for the legends that surrounded it. Tales spoke of the Cold Queen, a mysterious being who ruled the frozen lands said to have powers over ice and storms. Most humans considered it a myth, a story to keep explorers from wandering too far. Elias had never believed in such things, until today. As he approached a narrow ice bridge stretching across a yawning chasm, the wind grew sharper, louder, almost as if it were speaking. The bridge creaked under his weight, thin layers of ice trembling with each step. Below, the chasm seemed bottomless, the shadows twisting in ways that made his stomach tighten. He paused, studying the path ahead. Something felt wrong. A sudden crack split the air, the ice beneath him trembled. Instinctively, Elias jumped back, clutching his climbing pole. For a moment, nothing happened. The wind seemed to laugh at him, carrying icy whispers across the void. Then he noticed it, a figure standing at the far edge of the bridge. She was tall, taller than any human, with an elegance that made Elias' heart skip. Her skin shimmered like ice under the dim sunlight, patterns of frost forming along her arms and neck. She wore a long cloak of silver and white that seemed woven from the snow itself. Her hair was pale blue, flowing like frozen waterfalls, and her eyes were the color of clear glaciers, cold yet somehow intelligent, piercing straight through him. Elias froze. He had expected danger, wolves, storms, avalanches, but not this. And yet, despite her icy presence, she did not move aggressively. She simply watched him, her gaze calm, almost curious. "Come," she said, her voice like the soft crackle of ice. "Sit beside me." Elias stumbled back, startled. His mind raced. Humans were told that the Cold Queen was cruel, that those who approached her rarely returned. And yet here she was, extending an invitation. Against every instinct, something about her tone was compelling. Why me?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly, though he tried to sound braver than he felt. "You are not like the others," she said, stepping forward. Each movement made frost bloom around her feet, and the air seemed to shimmer with cold energy. "Come, sit beside me." "Do not fear," Elias hesitated. Every nerve in his body screamed to run, to escape the open bridge and the strange power radiating from her. Yet curiosity rooted him to the spot. Something in her gaze promised knowledge, a story that no human had ever heard, and he wanted to see it, to understand it. Slowly, cautiously, he stepped forward. The bridge felt more fragile with each step, but the figure did not move from her throne-like seat, a natural formation of ice carved into a perfect chair atop a plateau of frozen crystal. Elias approached, keeping his hands ready to grab his climbing pole in case the ice betrayed him. When he finally reached her, he hesitated, then sat beside her, careful not to touch her unless invited. The Cold Queen studied him closely. Her eyes scanned every inch of him as though measuring his strength, courage, and perhaps his mind. Then she nodded once, almost imperceptibly. "You are brave," she said. "Not in the way you think. Humans are strange. They survive where others fail because they are unpredictable, because they adapt." Elias blinked. I just wanted to explore. I didn't mean to," he trailed off, unsure how to explain why he was here. The cold was seeping through his clothing now, but strangely near her he felt a faint warmth, not physical, but something in the air that made him less aware of the freezing wind. "I know why you are here," she said, her voice calm, steady, "and I have been waiting." "Waiting," he repeated, incredulous. "For me?" "Yes," she replied. "Many come and go, few understand, but you may." She extended her hands slightly, frost forming at the tips of her fingers, a sign of her power. "Do you wish to learn, human?" Elias felt a shiver run down his spine, not from cold, but from awe. Learning from the Cold Queen was not just knowledge. It would be survival, understanding the very forces of Cryovast, secrets of ice and weather, things no human had ever touched. And yet, he was afraid. I do," he said after a pause. His voice was small but steady, and he realized he meant it. The cold queen smiled faintly, the first warmth he had seen from her. Then listen well. Cryovast is older than most stars you have seen. Its ice holds memory, its storms hold stories. You will learn to read them, but first, she paused, letting her gaze sweep the horizon. You must survive them. Suddenly, a roar split the air. Elias turned to see the edge of the plateau breaking away, ice collapsing into the chasm below. Snow and frost tumbled in huge sheets, forming a miniature avalanche toward them. The cold queen remained calm, almost serene. "Do not panic," she said, her hand hovering over the ice. Frost spread from her fingertips, freezing the collapsing snow midair, halting the avalanche in a sparkling moment of suspended danger. Elias' jaw dropped. He had expected storms, yet she controlled them as easily as one might wave a hand. You're controlling it," he whispered. "Yes," she said simply. "This world responds to me as I respond to it, but only if you know how to listen. Few can. Humans are rare in that regard." Elias swallowed hard. He wanted to ask how, why, but words failed him. The cold queen was more than legend. She was power, wisdom, and danger all wrapped into one. And now somehow she had chosen him as a companion or perhaps a student. For a long moment they sat in silence, the storm around them frozen in perfect stillness. Elias realized he was trembling, not from cold, but from the sheer weight of the moment. He was on an alien world, sitting beside a being more powerful than anything he had imagined, someone who could reshape the environment with ease. "Tell me," he finally said, voice low. "Why do you choose to speak with me?" The cold queen tilted her head, considering. "Because humans have a quality others do not. They fight, they adapt, they endure, and when faced with the impossible, they do not always fail. You carry that within you." "I need to see if it is true." Elias' heart raced. The words were both terrifying and thrilling. He had always thought humans were fragile, a minor species in a vast galaxy, but here on Cryovast, the cold queen suggested otherwise. I will do my best," he said, trying to sound brave. She nodded again. "Good, there will be tests, there will be danger, but also knowledge, power, understanding. Sit with me and learn the first lesson." The wind began to calm, the frozen plateau settling as if respecting her authority. Elias watched the strange patterns of frost swirling around her throne, sparkling in the pale light. It was beautiful, terrifying, and alive all at once. For the first time in his life, Elias realized he had stepped into a story larger than any human had ever lived. And at the center of it was the cold queen, watching him, waiting to see what he was truly made of. As night fell over the icy plains of Cryovast, Elias sat beside her, the cold no longer just a threat, but a teacher. The adventure had begun. The frozen plains of Cryovast stretched endlessly beyond the throne of the cold queen. Snow glittered like diamonds under the pale light, and the air shimmered with a strange, quiet energy. Elias could feel it pressing on his skin, cold but alive, as if the planet itself were watching. He had spent the night beside the cold queen, observing her subtle control over the ice around them. By morning, he realized that surviving Cryovast would require more than warmth and strength. It would require understanding, intelligence, and courage. The cold queen rose from her throne, her cloak of frost sweeping the ground as she moved with the grace of flowing ice. "It is time for your first test," she said, her voice calm, almost hypnotic. "You cannot survive Cryovast by strength alone. You must learn to think, to adapt, and to care. That is what makes humans remarkable." Elias stood, shivering despite his heavy clothing, and nodded. "I am ready," he said. The cold queen extended her arm, pointing toward a distant canyon. "Beyond that ridge lies the frost maw," she explained. "It is a labyrinth of ice tunnels, some collapsing, some endless. Within it are creatures native to this planet. Your task is simple in words, but difficult in practice. Guide the lost ones to safety. You may not harm them, and you may not take unnecessary risks with your own life. Do you understand?" Elias swallowed hard. "Lost ones?" he asked. "They are the children of the frost kin," she replied. "Small, fragile, and intelligent, their survival depends on your choices." Elias' heart pounded. He had faced harsh weather, isolation, and even dangerous creatures before, but this was something different. He was not just surviving, he was responsible for lives that were alien, delicate, and dependent on him. He followed the cold queen to the edge of the ridge. The canyon below yawned like a frozen mouth, jagged icicles hanging from its edges. Snow swirled violently in the wind, and faint cries echoed from the depths. Elias could barely make out tiny figures huddled together, their bodies small and glowing faintly with bioluminescent patterns. "They are frightened," the cold queen said, "and they will only trust someone who acts with thought, not with force. Remember, human, this is your first true challenge." Elias nodded and carefully began his descent. The ice beneath his boots was slick, the wind threatening to push him off balance. Every step required calculation. He used his climbing pole to test the stability of the ice before placing his weight, sometimes crawling on all fours when the surface was too treacherous. The frost-kin children stared at him with wide, fearful eyes. Some hid behind frozen rocks, others tried to escape deeper into the labyrinth. Elias knelt on the ice and spoke softly, hoping they would understand his intent. "It's okay," he said. "I'm here to help. Follow me if you can. I'll get you out safely." One small figure hesitated, then slowly moved toward him. Its movements were cautious, almost like it was testing him. Elias smiled and held out his hand. "Good, we'll take it slow." The tunnels of the frost maw were more dangerous than Elias had imagined. Ice walls shifted unexpectedly, trapping passages or opening new ones. Sometimes, strange echoes made it impossible to know where the children were, and he had to rely on intuition and careful observation to track them. At one point, a tunnel collapsed behind him with a thunderous crack, cutting off the way they had entered. Elias froze, listening. The children cried out, but he kept calm. Panic would only worsen the situation. He guided them through an alternate passage, marking the walls with subtle scratches so they could find their way. It took hours, each step exhausting and perilous, but Elias refused to give up. He spoke to the children gently, telling them stories about his home, about humans and their strange ways, hoping to earn their trust. Slowly, they began to follow him without fear. Suddenly, a shadow fell over them. A frost-maw predator, a massive creature with icy scales and glowing eyes, blocked the narrow tunnel. It hissed, the sound echoing like a frozen windstorm. The children froze in terror. Elias' heart raced. The cold queen had warned him that no harm must come to the children, but he had no weapon strong enough to fight such a creature. He thought quickly. Humans survived by using the mind as much as the body. He noticed that the creature's gaze was drawn to movement and light. Carefully, he pulled out a reflective panel from his backpack and angled it toward the creature, catching the faint light in the tunnel. The predator hissed, confused by the sudden flash of light, and stumbled back. Elias whispered to the children, "Now, slowly follow me." Step by step, he led them past the creature, using his reflection trick to keep it distracted. It took patience and courage, but eventually they emerged from the tunnel, exhausted but unharmed. Elias collapsed onto the ice, gasping for breath. The children huddled around him, their glowing bodies warm in the cold air. The cold queen appeared at the ridge above, watching silently. She descended gracefully, her eyes reflecting pride. "You have done well," she said. "You were patient, clever, and brave. You did not rely on brute force, yet you ensured their safety. That is the essence of human strength." Elias looked at her, still catching his breath. I just did what felt right," he admitted. She nodded. "Intuition, courage, empathy, these are rare qualities and humans possess them in abundance. That is why I chose you." For a moment, Elias felt a strange warmth, a sense of accomplishment that went beyond survival. He had faced a deadly challenge and succeeded, not because of weapons or technology, but because of his mind and his heart. The cold queen extended her hand. Frost spread from her fingertips, forming a gentle glow that enveloped the children. "They will be safe now. You have earned my trust." Elias watched as the children scurried back to their homes in the ice, their small figures disappearing into the snow. He realized that this was only the beginning. Cryovast was full of dangers, puzzles, and mysteries. But for the first time, he felt capable of facing them. "Your journey is far from over," the cold queen said. "There are others who will test you, others who will challenge what you believe about humans and the universe. But remember this lesson: survival is not about strength alone. It is about thinking, adapting, and caring. That is what makes humans extraordinary." Elias nodded, feeling a sense of purpose growing within him. He had always wondered if humans were truly special in a vast, uncaring universe. Now he understood. Humanity's greatest strength was not in technology or muscle, but in the mind, the heart, and the willingness to act when others would hesitate. As they returned to her throne, Elias noticed the wind had calmed, the storm retreating as if respecting the cold queen's presence. He realized that Cryovast was more than a frozen wasteland. It was alive, responsive, and aware. And somehow the Cold Queen had chosen him to understand it. That night, as Elias sat beside her once more, he thought about the frost-kin children and the challenges ahead. Each test would be different, each danger unique, but he felt ready. The Cold Queen had awakened something within him, a determination to survive, to learn, and to prove that humans were capable of greatness even in the harshest worlds. He drifted into a restless sleep, dreams filled with icy labyrinths, glowing creatures, and the strange, powerful presence of the Cold Queen. When he woke, he knew that the next challenge would come soon, and he would be ready. Cryovast was teaching him, shaping him, and he was learning fast. Humans were small, fragile, and seemingly insignificant, yet within them burned a spark that could illuminate even the darkest, coldest corners of the universe. Elias felt that spark ignite within him, a warmth stronger than any fire, stronger than any storm. And the Cold Queen was watching, waiting for him to prove that spark was real. The frozen winds of Cryovast howled louder than usual that day. Ice crystals whipped across the plains, stinging Elias' face as he trudged beside the Cold Queen. After the test with the frost-kin children, he felt more confident in his abilities, but something in the air made him uneasy. The Cold Queen's usually calm expression was tense, her eyes scanning the horizon with a focus that Elias could not quite understand. "They are coming," she said, her voice low, almost a whisper. Elias turned to her, confused. "Who?" he asked. "The Ember Dominion," she replied. "A faction from the neighboring system. They seek to control Cryovast's climate core, the heart of this planet. If they succeed, they can use its power to dominate worlds far beyond this one." Elias' stomach tightened. Humans had faced danger before, but an alien faction with advanced technology and deadly intent was something else entirely. "How many?" he asked, his mind racing. "Too many," she said simply. "And they are skilled. You must be prepared, human. Today, you will learn that survival depends not just on courage, but on strategy and quick thinking." The Cold Queen led Elias to a high plateau overlooking a vast frozen valley. Through her gestures, Elias saw movement far below. A fleet of Ember Dominion ships hovering above the ice, their hulls glowing with a fiery energy that seemed out of place against Cryovast's frozen landscape. Small pods descended from the ships, carrying alien soldiers armed with advanced weapons that could melt ice instantly. The Dominion had arrived, and their intentions were clear. "Your task," the Cold Queen said, "is not to fight them head-on. That would be foolish. You must use your human strengths, creativity, adaptability, and unpredictability. That is your advantage." Elias nodded, though his heart raced. He had faced storms and creatures, but now he faced organized, intelligent enemies with technology far beyond his own. He had to think, and he had to act fast. The first movement of the Ember Dominion troops was sudden. They split into groups, heading toward the plateau where the climate core was located. Elias watched as their heat-based weapons began to melt parts of the ice, sending cracks echoing through the frozen valley. The Cold Queen extended her hands, forming barriers of ice, but even her power had limits. Elias scanned his surroundings, searching for anything he could use. His eyes landed on the frozen terrain, sharp ice spires, deep crevices, and unstable ridges. Humans survived through ingenuity, he reminded himself. If brute strength would fail, cleverness might succeed. He turned to the Cold Queen. "If I distract them, you can strengthen the ice barriers," he said. "I can use the terrain to slow them down." She regarded him with a sharp, icy gaze. "Do you understand the risk?" she asked. "I do," Elias replied, "but it is worth it." "We cannot let them reach the core." The Cold Queen nodded once. "Very well, human, show me what you are capable of." Elias moved quickly, sprinting toward a narrow ridge above the enemy. The wind tore at his clothing, but he pressed on. Using the jagged ice spires, he leapt and dodged, forcing the Dominion soldiers to adjust their paths. Every step he took created a distraction, a chance for the Cold Queen to reinforce her defenses. He noticed that their heat-based weapons created steam as they melted the ice, reducing visibility. Using this to his advantage, Elias threw reflective panels from his pack into the clouds of steam. Light bounced unpredictably, blinding the soldiers temporarily and causing confusion. They began firing at shadows, unable to predict his movements. The Cold Queen's voice rang out from above. "Well done, human. Keep moving. Use what the world gives you." Ilias nodded, realizing that Cryovast itself could be an ally. The ice, snow, and wind could be used strategically. He led the Dominion troops toward a series of deep crevices, forcing them to navigate carefully. Some soldiers fell into shallow chasms, scrambling to climb back while Ilias moved on, always ahead of them. He felt alive, every decision critical, every movement a test of skill. Suddenly, a group of Ember Dominion soldiers surrounded him. They fired their heat weapons, melting a path toward him. Ilias ducked behind an ice spire and thought quickly. He remembered the frost-kin tunnels and the suspended avalanche trick. He could use ice to freeze their path temporarily. He dropped water from a small container he carried and spread it over the ground, then focused his energy on creating a thin layer of ice. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough to make the soldiers slip and lose balance. They tumbled and fell, shouting in surprise as Ilias sprinted past them, leaving them struggling to regain footing. The Cold Queen's voice echoed again, calm but commanding. "You are learning, human. Your mind is your greatest weapon." Ilias felt a surge of pride, but he knew the battle was far from over. The Dominion forces regrouped quickly, adapting to his tricks. They had advanced AI systems guiding their movements, anticipating patterns. Ilias realized that to survive, he needed more than improvisation. He needed to think several steps ahead. He scanned the area and saw a natural ice bridge over a deep crevasse, thin but stable if used carefully. An idea struck him. If he could lure the soldiers onto the bridge, he could collapse it safely behind them, trapping a portion of their forces and buying time. With careful movements and calculated noise, Ilias led the Dominion troops toward the bridge. They followed, confident in their superiority, not suspecting the trap. Ilias ran across the ice bridge first, testing its stability, then signaled to the Cold Queen to focus her energy on reinforcing its edges just enough to hold his weight while preparing it to collapse under the enemy. The soldiers reached the middle of the bridge. Ilias dodged aside at the last moment. The Cold Queen's icy power surged, cracking the bridge in a controlled collapse. The Dominion soldiers fell into the crevasse, their weapons useless as they struggled in the icy depths. Ilias breathed heavily, his chest rising and falling from exertion, but he had succeeded. The Cold Queen descended beside him, her eyes gleaming with approval. "You are remarkable, human," she said. "You see possibilities where others see only danger. That is why I chose you." Ilias shook his head, still catching his breath. I just did what made sense. I wasn't thinking about myself. I was thinking about stopping them." "Exactly," she replied. "That is the human way. You are small, fragile, and yet you act where others hesitate. That is why humanity has survived among the stars. Your courage is not just bravery. It is creativity, empathy, and wisdom combined." They watched the remaining Dominion troops regrouping at a distance. Ilias realized that even though some had fallen, others would return. The Dominion was persistent and intelligent, but he also realized something else. Humans with quick thinking and adaptability could turn the tide even against advanced enemies. The Cold Queen turned to him. "The Dominion will not give up easily. You must continue to learn, human. You must continue to prove that unpredictability and courage can shape events, even in the most impossible situations." Ilias nodded, feeling a strange mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. Cryovast was a harsh teacher, but he was learning quickly. Each challenge forced him to grow, to trust his mind, and to embrace the qualities that made humans different from other species. Night fell over the frozen plains, and the Dominion ships retreated to orbit, regrouping for another attempt. Ilias and the Cold Queen stood on the plateau, watching the stars. He felt the weight of what had happened. He had faced an intelligent enemy, survived through cleverness and quick thinking, and protected what was important. The Cold Queen spoke softly, her voice carrying over the silent ice. "Humans are underestimated. Many species judge strength by size, by technology, by raw power. But humans have something deeper. You survive because you see patterns, because you adapt, because you care." Ilias looked at her, realizing that she was teaching him more than survival. She was showing him that humans, though small and fragile, could make a difference in a universe filled with powerful beings. He thought about the Dominion soldiers, the frost-kin children, and the perilous paths he had navigated. He had been terrified, yet he had acted. He had used his mind, his instincts, and his empathy to turn danger into advantage. And the Cold Queen had been watching, guiding, testing. Elias knew that the Dominion would return, stronger and smarter, but now he also knew that humans were capable of more than others believed. His ingenuity, his courage, and his quick thinking could change the course of events in ways no one expected. Cryovast had become a proving ground, a place where human potential could shine against unimaginable odds, and Elias was ready for whatever challenge came next. As the night deepened, the icy plains glowing faintly under the pale light of Cryovast's twin moons, Elias felt a sense of purpose stronger than fear. He was no longer just a traveler or explorer. He was a participant in a story far greater than himself, a story in which human courage and intelligence could shape the destiny of worlds. And the Cold Queen, watching him silently, knew that her choice of human companion was proving wise indeed. The sun barely rose above the horizon of Cryovast, casting pale, blue light across the endless ice plains. Frost glittered on every surface, and the wind carried a sharp, cutting edge that made even the strongest explorers shiver. Elias walked beside the Cold Queen, his boots crunching across the frozen ground. The events of the previous day weighed heavily on him. The Ember Dominion had retreated, but only temporarily. He knew they would return stronger and better prepared. "We cannot face them alone," the Cold Queen said, her voice calm but firm. "Your creativity is valuable, human, but strategy requires more than one mind." "We must form alliances." Elias glanced at her. "Allies who would help us. Most of the people here are scattered or afraid." She nodded. "The inhabitants of Cryovast are cautious. They fear the dominion and the power of this planet. But they also recognize strength when they see it. You, human, have proven yourself in ways few can. Together, we can unite those who survive here." Elias felt a mixture of pride and responsibility. He had come to Cryovast as an explorer, seeking knowledge and adventure, but now he was part of something larger. He was not just surviving, he was preparing to defend an entire world. Their first destination was a hidden settlement in a valley known as the Silver Hollow. The settlement was home to a small group of frost-dwelling aliens, creatures adapted to Cryovast's harsh climate. They had pale, icy skin and large eyes that reflected the faint light of their environment. They were wary of outsiders, especially humans, but the Cold Queen's presence lent her authority. As they approached, the settlers came out cautiously, watching the travelers with a mix of curiosity and fear. Elias stepped forward, bowing slightly in respect. "I am Elias," he said simply. "I mean no harm. I am here with the Cold Queen to protect this world from the Ember Dominion." A murmur spread through the crowd. One elder, a frost-skinned being with long, silver hair, stepped forward. "Many speak of humans as fragile, small, and weak," the elder said. "And yet we have seen your actions. You saved the frost-kin children and used the land itself to protect them. Perhaps there is truth in what the Cold Queen says." Elias smiled faintly. "I do not claim to be strong, but I do know how to think, and when we work together, we can face challenges that seem impossible." The Cold Queen nodded approvingly. "Humans survive not because they are the strongest, but because they adapt, inspire, and unite others. That is why I brought him here." After a long discussion, the settlers agreed to join forces. They shared their knowledge of Cryovast's hidden paths, ice caves, and defensive positions. Elias learned to read subtle signals in the wind and ice, signs that the settlers had relied on for generations. He realized that while humans were capable, learning from other species enhanced their abilities, creating something greater than any one race alone. Over the next days, they traveled across Cryovast, rallying scattered communities. Some were cautious, hesitant to trust outsiders, but Elias' bravery and the Cold Queen's authority convinced them. Small victories grew into a network of allies, united by a common purpose, defending the climate core from the Ember Dominion. One evening, as the group camped on a high ridge, Elias studied the terrain. He noticed potential traps and natural choke points. "We can use the ice spires to channel their forces," he explained. "If we position our defenders along these ridges, we can control where the enemy moves and limit their advantage." The Cold Queen studied his plan carefully. "Impressive," she said. "You think beyond yourself and anticipate the actions of others. That is human ingenuity in action." Elias felt a surge of pride. Cryovast was harsh, dangerous, and beautiful, and he had learned to use every advantage the planet offered. The settlers listened attentively, following his instructions to prepare defenses and stock supplies. It was exhausting work, but Elias felt alive in a way he never had before. The Ember Dominion did not wait long to return. Their ships appeared in the sky, glowing red against Cryovast's pale light. The sound of their engines carried across the frozen plains, a constant reminder of the threat they posed. Elias and the Cold Queen led the Allied forces to strategic positions, using ridges, ice walls, and natural crevices to create a defensive network. When the Dominion troops descended, Elias moved among the defenders, coordinating positions and giving instructions. His human perspective brought fresh ideas. He suggested using reflective ice panels to confuse heat sensors, creating false signals that misled the Dominion's AI systems. He directed small groups to flank and delay, buying time for the main defensive line. The battle began with a surge of heat weapons that melted parts of the ice. Dominion soldiers advanced quickly, expecting to overwhelm the defenders, but Elias' preparations turned the tide. Ice spires redirected their movements, slippery surfaces caused chaos, and reflective panels blinded sensors. Humans and Cryovast inhabitants fought side by side, adapting in real time to the Dominion's tactics. At one point, a group of Dominion soldiers managed to break through a forward ridge. Elias spotted them and acted immediately. He led a small team through a hidden tunnel, surprising the intruders from behind. Using careful strategy rather than brute force, they managed to disable the group without casualties. The other settlers followed his lead, inspired by his courage and quick thinking. The Cold Queen watched from above, controlling the ice around the main defensive lines. Her power was immense, but Elias realized that strategy and adaptability were just as important. The Dominion could be strong, but human creativity and the ability to unite others gave them an unexpected advantage. Hours passed in tense, careful combat. The Dominion forces adapted, but Elias and the Allies were always one step ahead. His suggestions, combined with the Cold Queen's control of the ice, created a dynamic defense that was nearly impossible for the enemy to overcome. Finally, the Dominion forces began to retreat. Their ships rose into the sky, regrouping for another attempt. Elias and the Cold Queen stood on the highest ridge, looking down at the frozen battlefield. The Allies had won a temporary victory, but the threat was far from over. "You have done well, human," the Cold Queen said. "Your ability to inspire, strategize, and adapt has saved many lives today. Cryovast would have fallen without your presence." Elias shook his head. "I didn't do it alone. The settlers, the Frost kin, everyone played a part. I just helped them see the possibilities." "Exactly," she replied. "Humans are remarkable because they see beyond themselves. You act, adapt, and inspire others. That is why you are vital to this fight. Remember, human strength is not always physical. It is intelligence, courage, and the ability to unite those around you." That night, Elias and the Cold Queen discussed plans for the next phase. The Dominion would return stronger and more organized. They would need to use every advantage Cryovast offered and every skill Elias had learned. The planet itself could be an ally if they understood it. Elias studied maps, ice formations, and wind patterns. He trained the allies in strategies that relied on coordination, observation, and quick thinking. Each exercise made him more confident, more aware of humans' unique capabilities. He realized that even in a universe full of powerful species, humans could make a difference if they used their minds and hearts together. The Cold Queen watched him quietly, seeing the transformation in the human she had chosen. He was no longer just an explorer. He was a strategist, a leader, and a symbol of hope. His ingenuity and courage had united the inhabitants of Cryovast, showing that humans could shine in the darkest, coldest places. As the twin moons rose over the frozen plains, Elias looked out across the ice. The Ember Dominion would return, but he felt ready. He understood that survival was more than strength. It was creativity, courage, and the ability to inspire others to act. Humans, fragile yet remarkable, could influence the fate of worlds. Cryovast had become a proving ground, a place where human potential could flourish. And Elias, beside the Cold Queen, had proven that even a single human could change the course of events in ways that even the strongest enemies could not predict. Tomorrow the Dominion would return. But tonight, they had allies, plans, and the unshakable resolve that humans could endure and triumph, even in the most impossible circumstances. And the Cold Queen knew with quiet certainty that her choice of companion had been wise. Humanity had arrived on Cryovast not by strength, but by ingenuity, courage, and the spark of determination that could turn the tide of even the most desperate battles. The wind on Cryovast was different that day. It wasn't just cold, it carried tension, charged with the knowledge that something monumental was about to happen. Elias stood atop the highest ridge beside the Cold Queen, overlooking the frozen plains. Beneath them, the climate core shimmered faintly through cracks in the ice, a pulsing heart of energy that stabilized the planet's extreme weather. It was beautiful, fragile, and essential. "The Dominion is coming," the Cold Queen said, her voice calm but firm. "This will be their greatest attempt. If they succeed, Cryovast will be lost, and the core's power could be used to destroy worlds far beyond this planet. Today, your skills, human, will be tested like never before." Elias nodded, feeling a tight knot of fear and determination in his chest. He had faced storms, predators, and alien soldiers before, but nothing compared to the scale of this battle. Yet he was ready. Cryovast had taught him, the Frost kin and settlers had supported him, and the Cold Queen had guided him. Humans might be small and fragile, but ingenuity, courage, and heart had proven far stronger than brute force. The first wave of Dominion ships appeared on the horizon, fiery red against Cryovast's pale blue sky. Their engines roared, and heat weapons began to slice through the ice. Dominion soldiers poured onto the frozen plains, organized, intelligent, and confident. Elias watched their approach, analyzing their formation and their movements. "We must use Cryovast itself," he said to the Cold Queen. "The ice, the wind, everything. We can make them struggle, slow them down, and protect the core." She nodded. "Do it, human. Show them the strength of your species." Elias moved among the allies, directing settlers and Frost kin alike. He had prepared traps, ice barricades, and reflective panels to confuse the Dominion's sensors. Every ridge, crevice, and ice formation was a part of his plan. Human creativity and foresight were the foundation of their defense. The Dominion advanced quickly. Heat weapons melted paths in the ice, creating dangerous fissures. Elias signaled small teams to redirect them into traps, forcing soldiers onto narrow ridges where movement was limited. He used reflective panels to mislead their AI systems, bouncing light into sensors and creating phantom figures. Confusion spread among the enemy ranks. The Cold Queen stood above the battle, shaping the ice with graceful movements. Massive spikes rose from the ground, freezing advancing enemies in place. Snowstorms whipped through the battlefield, controlled and directed to slow Dominion forces. Elias realized that her power was incredible, but alone it would not be enough. Human ingenuity and leadership were the key to victory. A group of Dominion soldiers broke through one of Elias' defensive ridges. He spotted them immediately and raced to intercept. Using a combination of ice, quick thinking, and terrain, he led them into a trap, a hidden crevice that collapsed behind them, trapping them without harm but stopping their advance. His human creativity had turned a dangerous situation into an advantage. The battle raged for hours. The Dominion adapted, sending reinforcements, attempting flanking maneuvers, and using heavy weapons to melt key ice formations. Elias and the Allies adapted just as quickly. Humans could improvise, think unpredictably, and inspire others to act in unison. Cryovast itself became a weapon and a shield under their guidance. At one point, a group of Dominion ships targeted the climate core directly, firing beams of heat and energy. Elias and a small team raced to intercept, building ice barriers and using reflective surfaces to redirect the beams. It was a dangerous task, and the core's energy pulsed dangerously close to instability. One mistake could have destroyed everything. Elias shouted instructions, moving quickly, directing allies to reinforce weak points and to anticipate the Dominion's moves. His heart pounded, but he remained calm, relying on experience, observation, and intuition. Step by step, they managed to deflect the attacks, the core stabilizing once again. The Cold Queen descended to the battlefield, her eyes glowing with ice energy. She raised her hands, and the frozen plains responded. Massive spikes rose, ice walls formed, and snowstorms twisted to block and confuse the Dominion forces. Elias worked in tandem, coordinating movements, anticipating weaknesses, and inspiring allies to act with precision. Finally, Elias saw the opening he had been waiting for. A group of Dominion leaders, controlling the attack from a central pod, had exposed themselves while attempting to coordinate reinforcements. He gathered a small team of human and cryovast allies and moved quickly. Using ice tunnels, reflective panels, and precise timing, they infiltrated the pod. The Dominion leaders were caught off guard. Elias and the team used their wits, redirecting heat weapons harmlessly into the ice while neutralizing the controls. Within moments, the command pod was disabled. Dominion coordination collapsed. Without leadership, their forces became disorganized, falling into the traps Elias had prepared across the battlefield. The Cold Queen raised her hands, sending a pulse of icy energy across the plains. Remaining Dominion troops were frozen in place or forced to retreat, unable to maneuver through the hazardous terrain. The ships, unable to adapt to the frozen traps and reflective surfaces, withdrew from Cryovast's atmosphere, retreating into orbit. Elias sank to the ice, exhausted but exhilarated. The climate core pulsed steadily, stable once more. The frost kin and settlers cheered, their voices carrying across the frozen plains. Humans and Cryovast inhabitants had triumphed together. The Cold Queen descended beside him. "You have done it, human," she said. "You have not only protected Cryovast, but you have shown that human ingenuity, courage, and adaptability can triumph where brute force and technology alone fail." Elias looked at her, breathless. I couldn't have done it without you, without everyone. Humans alone are small, but together we can make a difference." "Precisely," she replied. "Humans survive and thrive not by strength alone, but by their minds, their hearts, and their willingness to act. You have proven this today. Cryovast will remember your courage, and the universe has seen that humans are not to be underestimated." The allies gathered around, sharing stories of the battle and celebrating their victory. Elias realized something profound. Strength was not just physical. Humans, fragile and seemingly insignificant, had made a difference because of courage, creativity, and unity. Cryovast had become a proving ground, and humans had shown that even the smallest species could shape the fate of worlds. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the ice, Elias stood beside the Cold Queen. "What now?" he asked. "Now," she said, "we prepare. The Dominion may return, but you have proven that humans can meet any challenge. You have shown that adaptability, intelligence, and empathy are forces stronger than fire, stronger than ice. And that is why you will continue to be my advisor and companion. Together, we will ensure Cryovast and its lessons endure." Elias felt a warmth in his chest, not from heat but from understanding. Cryovast had taught him, tested him, and shown the universe that humans were more than fragile explorers. They were thinkers, innovators, and leaders. He looked out across the frozen plains, watching the shimmering climate core, and felt a deep sense of purpose. Humanity had arrived in a universe full of powerful beings, not by weapons alone, but by courage, ingenuity, and heart. And as the Cold Queen watched, silent and powerful, Elias understood something even greater. Humans could change the course of events, protect what mattered, and rise to challenges no one else dared face. Cryovast was a frozen world, but in that ice, human potential had burned brighter than any flame. The Ember Dominion may return, the Cold Queen may face new threats, and Cryovast may demand more tests, but Elias knew this truth. Humans, small yet remarkable, would endure, adapt, and triumph. And together, they had begun to write a story that would be remembered across worlds.